What's going on, everyone? This is Ryan with, and we'll say automatic comics and cards again today. So, we're going to be talking about this card, but also how it relates to some big comics or art that have sold in the past. So, I thought this story was really interesting because we now know who bought this card. So when I just saw that this card sold for, $12.9 million dollars, I mean, for one thing, like that number seems bananas, especially when you hear about the price history of this card. I don't have the exact article up, but it was like there was a guy who bought it back in like 2012 or 2013 for like 25,000. Then he sold it maybe 3 or 4 years later for like 180,000 or 150,000. And then now, like 8 years or so after that, it sells for $12.9 million. Just bananas. I mean, the most expensive card now, at least from what I understand, maybe with public sales or whatever, but the most expensive card ever. And it's not some vintage card, anything like that. And I know people like talk about, they're like, oh, but it's a one of one. And it's like, yeah, I mean, there's lots of one of one things that are out there, and so like to me, like just saying it's a one of one is a real weird way of trying to justify like $12.9 million for this card that it's signed by Kobe Bryant, signed by Michael Jordan, has these patches on there, and I mean it's a wild number. And so I thought I'd give like my perspective initially based on someone who doesn't really follow the card market, right? Like what this looks like to me. And off the bat, I was just like, man, that's crazy. Like it almost feels like a jump the shark type moment for cards. like $12.9 million for this card from 2007. Like that's what it feels like my gut feeling on this. And then we saw who bought it. So we've got Kevin O'Leary here, the guy from Shark Tank. He is the one who has purchased this card along with two other people. All right, so let's take a look at what they're saying here. So Kevin O'Leary, known as Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, told CNBC he and two other partners bought a 2007 and 08 MJ Kobe Logoman card at Heritage Auctions early Sunday morning for a record $12.932 million. So he said, we bought the card. I'm very proud to own the card. I've been looking at this asset class for 3 years now. It's an extraordinary return. So he is only looking at these from a return perspective, which is fine. That's fine. He's comparing it to things like Warhol paintings and that kind of stuff. Now he does get down here, which is something that I thought was interesting. He said, I don't think this piece will come to market again during my lifetime. It's going to be part of an index that I'm going to continue to grow along with my partners. We look at it no different than our Bitcoin or Ethereum holdings or gold holdings. It's going to be 5% weighting in my portfolio, maybe more. I don't see it any differently than any of those other asset classes. However, it's a lot more fun. The people I'm meeting in this hobby are truly crazy. So the thing when I see this with him is that, at least from my perspective, when I look at collectibles and how they generally provide some type of like very solid return long term, and they really do. Long term, if you look at comics and whatever, like they provide a solid long term return. Now we have had this huge weird shift in the last 5 years because of the comic boom. And so that's kind of thrown things off historically for a little bit. We'll see what happens over time with that. But what I generally see is that the reason that these things go up in price over time isn't just that they go up in price, it's not like a business that has earnings or whatever else or perceived future earnings that are driving that value. It's a thing that goes up in value because more people want to own that thing, or people want to own that thing. And it's usually, at least from what I've seen in my perspective, is that it's because a lot of people that are in these collectible spaces have emotional connections to those items. Whether it's Pokemon you played as a kid, comics you read as a kid, or the movies that you've watched, sports players that you idolize or whatever, or sports that you're big fans of, that kind of stuff. in this case, this is, you know, a person who, at least it comes across as, does not care about these items in that way. He only cares about the physical or the return that he can get for that item. Like, I think he said, like, he expects he'll probably only see this card one time, like in person. He'll actually only ever see it once, and then it'll get locked up in some safe somewhere, and he'll never look at it again. So my concern, or my, you know, is that when you start getting into that area where you're getting people involved that do not legitimately care about the items themselves, that's when you're going to start seeing a drop, because you're just trying to pass the thing off to the next sucker at that point. You know, like that's how I look at it. Like when it's a people that don't actually care about it, it's like, can I get someone else to pay me more for this thing? And, you know, it's just, that's how I see it. And I know, like, maybe I'll get a lot of pushback on that thought, but that's how I view these items that have no, like, core, like, inherent value to them. They're valuable because people care about them. And so when he was talking about, you know, putting together this index, like, that reminded me of when there were similar indexes that were being put together where people were trying to buy up, like, comics and things during the comic boom. And I remember seeing an article where they were talking about how it was really difficult to buy a lot of these comics from collectors because the collectors just wouldn't sell them, even if they were given, like, strong offers. They're just like, no, like, I love this thing, I don't want to let it go. And when your only connection to an item is the return that it can give you, that goes away. And so, like, to me, like, this just, like, it feels almost like a peak moment. Now, I don't know, like, maybe I'm completely wrong about that, but to me, it feel like this sale feels like a peak moment, not a moment that is going to drive more, you know, up into the future. And I could be completely wrong. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things to me. But that's what, like, from my perspective, seeing this sale, that's what it comes across as. But since we have this, you know, this is the biggest card of all time, I thought we'd also talk about the biggest comics and art that have sold, art related to comics, at least across, you know, the different eras. So we'll start with the Golden Age. All right. We had this book right here, Action Comics #1, sold for $6 million in April of last year. An 8.5. A lot of people actually thought this one was going to sell for more. Personally, the reason I think it didn't is that this book, if you can see here, was an 8.0. You know, it was an 8.0, same, you know, Kansas City pedigree. It got resubmitted. It got an 8.5. And I don't know, I felt like an 8.5 was pretty generous on this book. And so I think that probably held it down some. I mean, it's still obviously a beautiful copy. There's only 2 9.0s that are out there. There is a raw copy that I believe people think is a 9.2. But I mean, yeah, it's one of the best copies in existence of Action Comics #1, sold for $6 million. And at least in terms of public sales, like, it's always possible there's been a private sale for more. That is the most expensive comic book that has ever sold, and the most expensive Golden Age, obviously, comic book that's ever sold. Now, if we jump to the Silver Age, we got Amazing Fantasy #15, first appearance of Spider-Man, a 9.6. There are no 9.8s of this book. So if we go down here, you can see there's 4 9.6s, 0 9.8s. So this is the highest graded copy, unlike the Action 1, which could have a higher grade copy come up for sale and therefore, you know, beat out that number. This is the highest graded copy, and this sold, like, peak comic boom period. I honestly, like, if this book came up again today, I don't think it would sell for 3.6 million. There's rumors that maybe Eminem bought this book. You know, that's the thought out there. But this is a case, you know, it's like, yeah, it's like the super rare, expensive thing. Like, that comic boom period, like, really threw a wrench in some things. And so, you know, and I think it's a few reasons that we're coming back down in price and all that kind of stuff. But I think that it's very likely that if this book came up for sale again today, it would not hit 3.6 million. I think it might struggle to break 3. I think it would probably sell somewhere in the 2s. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. That means 4 of them comes up for sale again. All right, now if we jump to the Bronze Age, you might be surprised what the most expensive Bronze Age book is. I've talked about it on this channel. Marvel Spotlight #5, 9.8. Now, if you're looking at the most expensive Bronze Age book just in aggregate, like typical, not just the 9.8 because a 9.8 is rare, it's Hulk 181. Hulk 181 is the most expensive Bronze Age book. But when you're talking about a 9.8, because there's a very limited census of this book, this is the most expensive book. And this isn't even the most expensive sale. This sold for $264,000. This was like one of the books that kicked off the comic boom. But there was a sale, I believe it was through like either the Comic Link or Comic Connect sales platform for $360,000 last year. It was the same book. So you can see here 2573, blah, blah, blah. And we've got the same cert number. It was the same book. So the person who bought it for 264 was actually able to sell it for 360. So that book did go up in price, which I thought was really interesting because I don't know if it's updated here or not. But yeah, when that one originally sold, I believe there were 4 9/8s, and now there are 6. Let's see. They probably say it in here. Yeah, 4 and 9/8, none higher. So when this sold back in 2021, there were 4, and now there are 50% more. It sold for more. I think because that was a fixed price sale, like this was just a book, the book was listed on their sales platform. It was not an auction. That's why I think it sold for more. I think if this book comes up for sale again at auction, it will struggle to hit this number. I think because it had that 360 sale, that might help it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this book fell below 200 if it came up for sale again at auction. But never know until it comes up for sale. All right, now we're going to jump to the Copper Age. Copper Age. The most expensive book is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in a 9.8. Now, this was the most expensive sale, and I call this the Copper Age. Some people might not. I think it's Copper Age. It's like right on that line. Sold for $245,000. I did see, I believe, a $250,000 sale, I think on Instagram. I think it was through Elite Comics 11. I don't remember exactly what it sold for. I thought it hit like 250, but it was close to that. So it's possible there's been, something that was slightly higher than this during the comic boom. Again, September 2021. You see that similar trend with a lot of these non-Golden Age books, that they are setting their records back in, the comic boom period. But it has come down a lot. It's still the most expensive book from that era. I mean, you can see it's like $100,000 book. We haven't had one sell this year, at least not on this platform. There might have been one on Comic Link, but 87,000 is the current low for that book. So, it's been trending down. It's not like there's a shortage of them. There are quite a few 9/8s out there. But it is a highly in demand book. It is a relatively small print count. But it's still like it's an $80,000 to $90,000 book right now. I would not be surprised if it continues to drop down some, though. I mean, pre-comic boom, this book was 40,000, 35 to 40,000, and now it's still like doubled that. That type of stuff makes me nervous with price. So I wouldn't be surprised if it drops some more, but it is still the most expensive book from that era, at least that I could think of. I couldn't think of anything else more expensive. All right, now we're going to jump to the modern era. There are 2 books actually tied for the most expensive book. One of them is the current leader, though. First one, Amazing Spider-Man 667, the Delato variant. This was a 1 in 100 variant during a period when very few, or the purchases of these books was much lower. So there were not very many of these. It says as little as 200 potentially in circulation. So it sold for $43,200 in June of 2022. We also had Ultimate Fallout 4, which sold for $43,200 in January of 2023. So these two, this is the 1 in 25 variant, first Miles Morales. These two tied for the most expensive modern book. However, this book is the current leader because it has sold relatively recently and is still selling for $25,000 to $30,000. So if we look at the Delato variant, we had a $28,800 sale in January of this year, and then there was a signature copy. Here we go. Signature copy that sold for $31,200 in June of this year. So this book, while it has retreated, has retreated far less than Ultimate Fallout 4. This book has always been the modern grail. Ultimate Fallout 4, the variant, is a much more recent, quote, modern grail. So this has been one that people have been searching for. They're always looking for this in terms of the moderns. And so I'm not surprised. Like, to me, that's the bigger book regardless. But Ultimate Fallout 4, this one, variant edition, has fallen down to around $9,000. And so it's been pretty flat around there. I still personally wouldn't pay $9,000 for it, but that's where it's come down to. So it corrected far more severely than Amazing Spider-Man 667 did. So yeah, while it's probably the number 2 now, the number 2 modern book, the number 1, the current king and returned to being king, is Amazing Spider-Man 667, the Gelato variant. I love this book. I tried to bid on one. I was not successful. So, all right. So now, for what you could maybe say would be more comparable to something like this, because, they're claiming the 1 of 1, right? And so with comics, if you're going for a 1 of 1, you're going to talk about original art. And so the 2 most expensive pieces of comic related original art that I am aware of are this, the Frank Frazetta Egyptian Queen painting original art, which was used in Eerie number 23. So Eerie magazine 23 from 1969. I mean, Frank Frazetta, one of the most famous, well-known artists out there, sold for $5.4 million in 2019. This is before the boom era. I would not be surprised if this sold for more today, if it came up for sale. I don't think it's going to sell for $12.9 million, but I do think that this would sell for more. I would not be surprised one bit, especially with the huge demand that we're seeing right now for original art, and the fact that this is one of the most iconic pieces of original art that was ever done for a comic or magazine. I mean, this is a magazine, but same difference, right? Now, the second most expensive piece of original art that I'm aware of is this one. Not even the cover. Like interior story page number 25, Secret Wars number 8, Black Suit Spider-Man. It's not the first appearance of the black suit, but it is the origin of the symbiote. Sold for $3.36 million in 2022. Again, comic boom period. This is another one that, even though, like I said, even though art has gotten bigger, I don't think this would break 3.36 million if it came up again. Man, what would it go for? It's hard to say. I mean, art is difficult, and it's because it's the 101 stuff, but I would not expect it to break 3. It might break 2, but I don't think it's breaking 3 if it comes up again. I mean, I remember this sale shocked a lot of people. And when you have something that's a huge, shocking sale like that, if they come up again, they often correct. Now it's possible, but this felt like a comic boom fueled purchase. And I would not be surprised if this took a pretty hard fall. Now, I'm not saying that this would be the most expensive piece of original art for a comic. I think there are other things that could come up for sale that could go for more than this if they exist. I mean, that's always the tough thing. Like, from what I understand, like the Hulk 181 original art cover burned in a fire, like went up in a fire. And so I don't think that even exists anymore. There are things out there that could potentially, go for more if they are still, in existence. But yeah, I just thought this was interesting. This just like, it feels like, to me, like from a non-card person perspective, it feels like a jump the shark moment. Like, that's what that comes across as to me. And I'm sure there's going to be people like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, but I don't know, like 12.9 million for that card. I don't get it. And it's not like I don't understand cards. Like, I get collectibles being expensive and all of that, but this card being the most expensive card surprises me. And then when you look at, who bought it, and just like they're buying it solely for investment purposes, and just like doesn't seem like they really have any real like love for it. that's the stuff that makes me a little like just cautious about those types of purchases. You know, and the future of that market. Now, this is obviously that's a high end market. That's an extreme, but that's just my thoughts on that. But let me know what you think in the comments. You know, what do you think about this $12.9 million sale? What do you think about these other big books, big pieces of original art that have sold related to comics? If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and I will see you on the next one.